Brilliant. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to this Kalicube Tuesday special with Wordlift. Today we're going to be talking with Steve Wiideman.
Wiideman, you got it.
And Munene Kelvin. Did I get that right?
Yep.
A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Steve and Munene.
Serenade I've heard all day.
I've never been serenaded. This is the first.
That song has got me out of so many tight spots talking to people about things that I know nothing about. And today we're going to be talking about unlocking your SEO potential, measure the benefits of Schema Markup and SEO performance. This is a huge problem. Is we're all telling our clients, implement Schema Markup because it will improve your SEO performance, and it's very difficult to actually demonstrate. So before we get into that, number one, the audience, please post your questions into the chat. We will see them. We can answer them as we go through. And number two, this event will be available online on YouTube for years to come. So even if you miss something today, if Steve or Munene speak too quickly or say things that you don't understand, you can always watch it back. And the next is, Steve, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Steve Wiideman. I have about 25 years in the industry. I run a small agency consultancy here in the Los Angeles area, helping a lot of multi-location brands who are looking to scale search. Also teach at 3 different universities, Cal State Fullerton, UC San Diego, and Fullerton College. I started that about 4 years ago as an adjunct and realized that there's a huge need for better curriculum. So I wrote a textbook with my co-author, Scott Calley from University of Michigan. And I believe 39 schools have now adopted SEO strategy and skills into their university digital marketing curriculum. So very excited to be here and get nerdy on structured markup and knowledge graph and how we can measure the benefits of it. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, the huge point today is measuring. Schema Markup, we talk about that all the time. Measuring it is the huge challenge that we all have. Do we have a KPI and can we prove an ROI? For people who don't know what KPI is, key performance indicators, and ROI, return on investment. And I'm incredibly impressed by the university side of things because I've always thought the universities were way behind. And what you're saying is not necessarily
anymore. I'm hoping to make a mark on the industry a little bit if I can, but lots of schools still have to figure out and navigate their way through search. It's only one chapter in a lot of the textbooks that are available today versus having a textbook all of its own.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we all think it's the focus and the center of the universe, and it's not. It's one small chapter in digital marketing. Munene, can you present yourself?
Awesome. I'm clearly in the presence of greatness. After Steve's introduction, my name is Munene Kelvin. I am an SEO specialist at Wordlift with about 5 years of experience in the SEO field. Branched off from being a psychologist and decided to dump that and completely join SEO and get nerdy with it. So went through the whole works of toying around with content and finally landing on data science with SEO. So some very exciting stuff, and which is why I'm also very excited to be talking about how to measure schema, the performance of schema on your website.
Right, which is quite a long hop from psychology to measuring the effect of Schema Markup on SEO performance, which is delightful.
I'm a curious soul, is all I can say.
Brilliant.
And the rabbit hole never ends. Yep.
Excuse me, sorry, Steve.
Go ahead, Jason.
No. I mean, I'm deeply intrigued by the cursus, the way people end up in this industry. From psychology on Munene's side, I came from a music and cartoon side. Where did you come from, Steve?
Military. I was Army infantry in the 90s.
Wow.
That was kind of my first real world job outside of throwing newspapers as a kid. So I kind of hailed from that disciplinary background. I think you're right though, Jason. I think there's there's a certain culture that you have to embrace as an SEO, because you're not just in a regular come to work, check off some boxes and go home. Every day there's some new, AI, large language model, structured markup thing that you've got to acclimate yourself to, and you have to be, to really enjoy this industry, you have to be analytical and really left-brained enough to put together an audit and a strategy, and really try to put a game plan together for search. You've got to know enough about buyer psychology, which is great that we've got some of the psychology background here, to understand, what the need is of the person. Otherwise, you're writing an article for a sales page, or a sales page for an article, and you're never going to really have long-term success. You've also got to be extroverted enough to build relationships and get other websites, to want to link to you and to share your content. There's a little bit of that relationship building. And then you've also got to have that project management skill to take all those different disciplines and organize it within a project management system and hold various stakeholders accountable to getting it done. So you're an extroverted introvert, an introverted extrovert, and every day you learn something new. You're following, all these different search engine news sites and RSS feeds and everything you can to just completely try to master your craft, and you never will, because it's so dynamic. So yeah, you're right. It is a very interesting culture of employee of an industry. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I didn't say any of that. You just said it all. So hats off to you for saying all of that. And one thing, Munene, is Steve was talking about the fact that there's always something new. There's always a shiny new sequin every day. How do you avoid getting dragged into investigating things that at the end of the day don't really matter, to focus on the things that do matter day to day?
Thanks for chat. You don't have to.
I'm so terrible at not being dragged into those rabbit holes. Every time I see a new concept, it's very exciting for me. So I want to learn more. I'll follow webinars. I'll follow all the SEO events. Just try and figure out what new things are people tinkering with. I think one way to probably avoid getting dragged into too many rabbit holes, you'll definitely get sucked into one or two rabbit holes. But I feel like one way to really avoid getting into too many rabbit holes is to niche down and just to know what you really want to focus on. So there are people who are very good at content SEO, so you won't find them in rabbit holes that deal with data science. Those are rabbit holes for data scientists. So I'd say maybe just focusing on maybe one or two things where you feel like they really get your blood flowing, and then you decide these are the rabbit holes I really want to go down. Yeah, that's what works for me.
It's amazing. I'm doing a lot of guest speaking because I love earning links from colleges and universities. That's my little link building hack there. And one of the things I always get asked is, where should I start? And I'm like, well, don't start where I did. Don't learn basic HTML and table-based design and learn how to to convert it to table list design and now to responsive design. Don't go through all of that. Skip all that and focus on where there's a real need. Right now, there's a need in voice search. There's not many that have any experience working with the Google Action Console or Alexa skills. Nobody's really playing with those kind of technologies. Schema markup. How many schema experts are there out there? A very small handful. And if you go to Google and you search for structured markup expert, you'll get a consultancy that's probably going to charge $20,000, $30,000 a month, in many cases. So there's a huge demand for people who can be specialized in things. Right now, I would coin yourself as a large language model or chat SEO expert and get out there and just really ask those different language models and study how their algorithms work, so that as people start to move over to chat or test chat, that we know how to help businesses to make sure that they're still visible in a clickless search result. So I would agree with that 100%. Find the one thing that's the hardest, most complicated, weird rabbit hole thing you can find and master it. And in 4 years from now, 5 years from now, you won't have to worry about business. You'll be flooded with it. And that was what happened with me in 2005. My boss at Disney basically said, I'd love to help get you helping with SEO, but we're Disney. We really don't need it. Plus, I don't really know that you're good at that. And I had to rank for the word SEO expert to prove it, back then. And I did that. And because he's like, yeah, no one's really looking for an SEO expert. I'm like, but they will be one day. I guarantee it by 2010, I know people are going to be searching SEO expert. Surprisingly, the volume hasn't changed that much for that query, but the demand, absolutely. I've made probably in my career, if I had to add up, what I'd made, it's probably around the 4 million range just for optimizing for the keyword SEO expert when I was doing that. So think about how you're optimizing for what your title should be in 3 to 5 years from now, when there's a limited number of experts in the growing, changing, evolving world. So today, when you're learning about measuring structured markup and becoming a structured markup expert, might be one of those titles that you take on or experiment with to see if you can draw on new business if you're an agency. Just something for, food.
Delightful. Yeah, no, 100%. And optimizing for ChatGPT. I was talking to Fabrice Canel the other day about what they expect it to do. And they're saying, well, search, answer, and assistive are all going to live side by side. Yep. And the answer aspect of ChatGPT is to bring people down the funnel. So the final click is the most valuable click. And for that, we need to communicate and feed these engines, whether it be search, answer, or assistive. Mm-hmm. And that is great in terms of, from Calicube's perspective, getting these machines to understand who you are, what you do, and which audience you serve. And from Wordlift's perspective, getting it to understand the details of your offer so that it can bring the user down the funnel, which is much more efficient and effective than visiting your site, unless you build your own super duper LLM model based on the content you have, which is apparently what every big company is going to be doing.
You're right. And you know what's going to happen as soon as Google puts that chat feature from their Bard feature on their site, ChatGPT is it's just going to start to fizzle away, because no one's going to remember ChatGPT. No one's going to remember how to pronounce it. Those people that are new to it, especially the folks that aren't really internet savvy, they're going to do what they always do. They're going to go to Google and go, oh, what's this? And whatever that ChatGPT thing was that they heard about, they don't need it now. They're going to be in Bard. So
now there you go. Munene, what's your thought? Sorry, what is your thought on that?
I feel like they'll enjoy being fast to market for a while, because I feel right now, if anyone talks about like a chatbot, ChatGPT is all the craze, right? I have people from friends and colleagues from different professions, and everyone is asking ChatGPT different things. I saw someone post that you no longer need to write CVs and cover letters anymore. You just throw in you just tell ChatGPT, and then you tell it, oh, shorten this, it's too long, I don't think any interviewer is going to read it. So I feel like they'll enjoy being fast to market for quite a while. Of course,
we'll see. Now, remember this one thing about ChatGPT versus Bard before we jump into the structured markup is, right now, if you're watching this webinar and you're like, oh, I have to go, but don't worry, I know I'm going to get the recording of it later. Later today, you'll go to get the URL to the recording and probably the transcript. And then what you'll do is you'll drop the URL to the transcript in ChatGPT, and you'll say, give me the key takeaways and action items from this webinar. And ChatGPT is going to go, I'm sorry, I can't access the internet beyond 2021. Bard, on the other hand, is going to be like, yeah, here you go. So unless they change that, and I know there's going to be plugins and extensions, and it's going to get into all sorts of weird and complicated, I think Bard's going to keep it simple. But we'll see.
Okay. I mean, and I think it's really important to state there's a difference between ChatGPT, which is the isolated model that you mentioned, and Bing, which is using live search results and then using ChatGPT to summarize them. And I was talking, once again, Fabrice Canel, I've described them as dynamic knowledge panels. And it is basically a summary of the search results or the information behind the search result. And that's what Bing are doing. And it's hugely powerful and it's hugely interesting. And I've been having a great deal of fun playing with it. But you're right, we should really stick to the benefits of Schema Markup and how do we measure it? So, Munene, can you share your screen? I've seen you've taken it away. But if you share the screen, then you guys can give your presentation and I can shut up for 20 to 25 minutes.
I'm going to miss you, Jason. But hey, while he's pulling up the screen, my one thing to think about is as you start, getting into measuring markup is why at the end of the day, we really, really need it. There's three sort of core principles in how we approach search. One is the relevancy, and helpfulness of our content. When somebody performs a query, there's a specific page on your website that should appear, right? In most cases, it's not going to be your home page because you can't squeeze every keyword and every product as a keyword onto that page. So you got to make sure your page is the most relevant. Second, of course, is how we get other websites to mention and link to our content. Even Bard said they're still going to use links as a way, when I asked about the algorithm, links as a measure of the importance and relevancy of a site. But the third principle, beyond just our relevancy and our visibility, is going to be how users interact with our listing. I heard it said once at a conference I went to that you want to be the final destination that the user lands on. I've always used the phrase click and stay. When someone's performing a search, we want to make sure they're clicking on us more often and that they stay on our page more often, so that search engines know that we were helpful. They didn't come back and choose a competing result and stay there. And what the great benefit of structured markup is, well, the two parts of what Wordlift does, the structured markup piece, of course, enables us to have richer results. And there's a whole, if you want to search for it, there's a whole Google rich result gallery that you can explore of all the different ways that your listing can really stand out and get those clicks. And then, of course, on the knowledge graph side of things, by adding some structured markup and defining the meaning of words that are on the page, we're making it very clear to the search engine when we say we use a specific word, what that word means. Now there's a better chance that they're going to classify our page more accurately, because we've made it clear that this thing is about, or it mentions, a specific topic or entity. So that helps with that first principle, the relevancy and helpfulness of your content. So this is going to be really exciting because we're going to talk about how we measure that here in a minute. But I just want you to keep that in mind. Why do we care? Why are we on this webinar? Because we want better click-through rates, and we want to make sure that Google directly understands what the meaning of the words are on our page. So I'm going to shut up and let the baton pass. But
that was a great explanation. So Munene, over to you.
Awesome. Cool. So just like Steve was starting to explain, there's the background of, we're talking about measuring schema markup on your SEO performance, but possibly just to dial it a little back, there are people who might not know what schema markup is that we're talking about, or what even semantic SEO is. So excuse me. So in a nutshell, schema markup is the process of giving more meaning to and thematic depth to web content. So a good way to think about it is, when we talk about shoe, there are very different or very many ways to define the word shoe. So here, from a Wikidata screenshot, we see shoe could be a footwear, it could be an episode of Lilo and Stitch series, or Robot Chicken series. It could be a gaming device that I did not know about, or it could be, a family name. So if you talk about shoe in whatever context your website is meant for, it's important to tell the search engines, what shoe exactly do you mean? And that's where schema markup comes in. So schema markup is basically an initiative launched by Bing, Google, Yahoo, and later Yandex joined in, to basically start to give their machines more context to all this content that was being created on the internet. So it's a fast shared vocabulary where webmasters, such as you and I, can try to structure their metadata on their websites and give more context to all this content that they have. And here we see how it's actually injected into the website. So it's basically a few lines of code that you add to the website, and it gives more meaning to different items. So here, this is a website that has a shoe as a product, but without the schema markup, we wouldn't know too much information about it, because machines are not very good at reading the front end content that you have here. So here we see, if you look at the schema, we've injected more details about this product. So we're telling search engine this is a product. We're telling it that it's brown. We're telling it that on our product category, we list it as a shoe. So it's in the shoes category. We're giving it, we're telling Google exactly the SKU. and the price, and for how long this price is going to be valid for. So all this comes in handy at the end of the day to just give more context to just this particular product. And there's a lot more that you can do for editorial website or e-commerce websites to give more context to your content. Again, so once you give context to your content, how does this help Google, or how does this help your website? Just a few that come to mind are helping you with ranking, getting more real estate on SERPs. So you have all these different rich results where you have Google trying to show more content on the SERPs, and having rich results helps you to better target or better get an opportunity to appear on more of these. So this is an image, this is a review section, this is an image pack. There are other things that you might have seen, such as the people also ask section. And all these are different real estates where if you implement Schema Markup and you implement it correctly on your website, you get a chance to get on Google SERPs for all these rich results. The interesting bit for me here is how if you diversify the different schema types that you have on your content, it gives you a chance to get more opportunities on SERPs. So here I try to play around with the query Italian shoes. So here we're talking about, I searched for affordable Italian shoe brands, and the rich snippets that we see are the reviews section or an image, and also an image pack. But when we change that query to Italian shoes for women, the story completely changes, and Google is like, oh, we should be showing more images, and that takes up about this is almost everything that will be up here on section or on result 1 and 2, but all of it has been taken up by images. So if your website was appearing as event result 1 on this page, it's so far down below. If you don't have an image pack or you don't appear anywhere here, your chances of getting that CTR and organic traffic to your website becomes highly diminished. So that becomes a really good place where you can start to target the benefits of Schema Markup on your website. Some really nice tools that you can use to scale this or to play around with this. So if you're starting out, the schema.org documentation is a really good place to start. Of course, so many other different people have written about this. And you can find everything that you need on schema implementation or the different schema types here. If you're starting to tinker with it as well, I've played around with the technical SEO schema generator. I think it's a really cool tool that kind of lets you just generate that markup, and you can add it to the HTML of your website, and boom, now you have Schema Markup on your site or your pages. But in case you have like a really large website and you don't want to keep doing this manually, there are paid tools such as Wordlift that can automate this process, and it becomes really easy for you to do this just within one click, or just by installing the Wordlift plugin and doing a few configurations. Now you have Schema Markup on thousands of pages. I'm going to just pause there before we get into the measuring part of things.
Yeah. I mean, really quickly, the manual aspect is something. I mean, I was working with Schema Markup in 2014, 2015, doing it manually, and it's a huge amount of effort and very difficult to maintain. What's your experience been with that, Steve? Because you've been around for 25 years like me.
Oh, I love testing. I got a couple of case studies too we'll talk about if time permits here. But the easiest way, the absolute easiest way for you to test a change in and what a markup update could do for your traffic and for your SEO, the easiest way is to take one URL and make your update to that page, record, annotate the date that happened, I know it's a little bit more difficult now in GA4, but there are some Chrome extensions that you can add to still be able to log your annotations in GA4. Add that annotation in, put added, I don't know, video object markup to this URL, and then once you see the actual video thumbnail and the video result in the search result, then that's day one, right? We did it. We logged when we added it. We logged when we saw it propagate, and now we're going to watch. And the one thing we're going to look for, if you're doing this manually in Search Console, is you're going to drill into that one URL, and then you're going to watch your click-through rate. So you're going to do 7 days, prior. Probably give a couple days for the data to propagate, since it's a little bit slow sometimes still. Used to be much worse, but now we can get pretty close to real time. And then you'll compare, maybe the last 7 days versus 7 days prior, with a 2-day window gap, for data propagation. And then look, what's the click-through rate difference from when we added this video? It was about 10% lift. That's interesting. Let's test FAQ page. Let's test doing image object instead of video object. Let's test, et cetera, based on the content of the page and the interest of your consumers. That's the easiest way to really drill in for a structured, or for a rich snippet structured markup test. The knowledge graph testing, a little bit different, because we're not really going to see the search result look different. We're really just feeding specific entity data into the knowledge graph, and helping search engines catalog our content efficiently. The way we do that test is very similar. You'll log when you added the markup. You'll log probably a few days later, when you start to look at your Google Search Console data for that URL. If you see kind of a trend, you'll know that hey, it took effect, it crawled, and it looked at the new way that we've been defining the words on our page, or explaining the meaning of words on our page, and now we see this little lift. What you'll do is you'll go over to impressions for your 7 days versus 7 days, and you'll look at the difference. Like, oh my gosh, all these new keywords are coming in, and all the ones that are really important to us that we've tagged as thing about, or thing mentions, made a difference, or didn't make a difference because maybe we overshot the mark. But that's what I would drill into. I would look at 7 days versus 7 days and go to query data and look at clicks and impressions to see if you're starting to appear for more of the keywords that are important to you, and less often for those that aren't. So those are two ways that I would test rich results, by looking at CTR, 7 days over 7 days, and then at a specific URL level with annotations, so you have that tracking. And then for knowledge graph, I would test looking at the array of new search terms that appear, and the difference in the time and the amount of time that you appear and are clicked on. There's my 2 cents for doing it the old-fashioned way.
Right. No, I think that's really important, and it's difficult to resist the temptation to just apply something site-wide because you're convinced it's going to work. Munene, what's your experience been with that? Disaster?
I haven't experienced the disaster per se, but I know it's really tempting to know. Okay, they say video markup works, so why am I not implementing it on my entire website? I remember when I first had a conversation with someone about testing, they asked me, if Wordlift knows schema works, why are they just leaving out a few URLs and not implementing the Wordlift technology on the entire website? And testing is something that is very easy to overlook. I think it's so powerful. And what Steve was talking about is perfect for you to look at it on a small scale.
Impossible to scale, though.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's impossible to scale.
Exactly. So maybe the only thing I can comment on is looking at it on a larger scale. So again, you can just have a control group, which is mostly what we do at Wordlift. So even the plugin comes with a feature where, okay, you wanted to include all of these URLs. You wanted to inject schema into all of these URLs. Okay, cool. So here's a feature where you can exclude some URLs, so that at the end of, I don't know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, when you're looking at the performance of the website and how did maybe this schema type help the website, you have this control group against maybe thousands of other URLs that you can look at. And of course, there are tools, for example, like Causal Impact, a really powerful tool by Google that you can use to just say, here's my control group, here's my variant group. Look at the performance. Is there a lift in the variant group? Is there a lift in the control group? Sometimes you might even find, so the tricky part is usually when you have a situation where there's a lift or even a drop. I've seen situations where a website, a large website is losing traffic, but we've seen maybe because of schema, the variant group where we had schema markup is losing less traffic compared to the control group. And that becomes something that you can't really tell until you look at a large amount of data. And now analyzing that large amount of data, that's where you have tools like Causal Impact that can really come in handy with that.
Yep. I think for e-commerce too, if you're thinking about where you start with those lesser performing categories. If you're going to run your tests, do some, with a control group of half, of the group that's not performing really well. And then put the schema on the other half and watch and see if one elevates and one doesn't. That way you can mitigate the risk of loss of revenue. I know some businesses, if you go down in rankings or lose clicks, it could be millions of dollars, particularly in luxury industries like Rolex. So yeah, I love that. For law firms, you might start with 2 or 3 practice areas. Maybe you do the ones that aren't as important to your business. Maybe workers' comp cases or slip and fall cases, is something that you use as a test group, and keep your car accident and truck accident, as your control group. So that way you can see if it made a dent before you make a change that could impact, clicks or traffic. Great point.
Right. Brilliant. Absolutely.
Actually,
and when you're talking about cars and trucks, dent is the exact right word to have used. Sorry, Munene.
No worries. I was going to say an interesting one I had the other day. We were talking to a client and they mentioned that they intentionally left on a website out of using, they don't use Wordlift on a specific website so that they can tell which website is going to perform better. I'm not sure if that's a very good way to test, but it was interesting to see how people have different ways of testing and having a control group.
Brilliant.
I did talk to the analyst at TripAdvisor on our, I don't know if you follow our podcast, it's called Unbottlenecked, and it's this really fun, kind of just hanging out with other peers and talking shop. And 2 of my peers are the SEO data analysts over at TripAdvisor. And we had this whole session on testing schema, and they said they were using schema like Frank's Red Hot. And like, yeah, we put that on everything, right? And I was like, wow. But they rolled it out as a test. Like you said, they took a sample group. They did some FAQ markup. They used a little bit of their own kind of internal AI to come up with the questions that people have around certain cities and destinations. And then boom, rolled it out like basically site-wide. So now pretty much every TripAdvisor page has FAQ page markup to get more of the search results by having questions and answers right below their listings. At the time, as many as 4 listings. And I think now the par is two different questions that'll appear underneath your listing. That's still 2 more rows beneath your blue link and black text. And it's still absolutely worth, testing.
Brilliant. Super duper. Which brings us to the measurement aspect, which I think is key. We've done half an hour on what schema is, how it can help us, why we're interested, and why it's fun, and how we should test. Now, how do we measure to prove to the boss that what we're doing is making sense?
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about 2 tools that I've used to measure that come in really handy. So there's Looker Studio and there's Power BI. So first I'm going to get into Looker Studio, which I'd say is best for small scale data. So if you have a website that's probably 100 or a few hundred pages, it's okay to use it. But when you're scaling into a website that has thousands of pages and you're trying to build your knowledge graph on that, and you want to measure the performance of your schema on such a large website, Looker Studio will take quite a while to load, and that might be a little frustrating. But still, it helps.
And just to be clear, Looker Studio is what I know as Google Data Studio.
Yes, Data Studio. Yes,
Sorry, just to be really clear, because when you said Looker the first time, I was going, "What are you talking about? A new tool that I've never heard about, but it's an old tool that I'd heard about."
Yeah, it's recently rebranded from Data Studio. Yeah, so
okay, brilliant.
So there's so many ways to measure your data or the performance of SEO using Looker Studio. And of course, the first thing you want to see is your Google Search Console data. And but you can already see this on Search Console, right? So it makes no sense to look at it on Looker Studio again. So where Looker Studio comes in handy is when you're able to build blends with different data sets. So you can do this with maybe a data set from a different spreadsheet. For example, you might have a situation where we're talking about you have a control group and a variant group. You have a list of 100 URLs, maybe 50 are variant, 50 are control, but it's only on the spreadsheet. So you possibly have two columns on the spreadsheet, a column named page and a column named control or variant. So you can blend those two together so that you can say, this is the relationship between the URLs that we have on Google Search Console and the URLs that we have on the spreadsheet. And this is how you can know that this is a control and this is a variant. That's where Looker Studio blends come in. Here, what I'm doing is a very interesting thing where you can now start to use different connectors to look at your data. So today, as we're talking about in the performance of Schema, Google Search Console will only give you the performance of specific pages, right? Sure, you can see the performance of probably how your pages appeared on FAQ or all these other rich results. But what if you have injected specific schema in your website and you're trying to figure out, okay, how is my material performing? Maybe you want to see the color. Is there a specific color that's outperforming another one? Is there a specific price or category that's outperforming another one? The only way you can do that is by customizing your report to be able to show these specific data sets or data points. So luckily, if you're using Wordlift, Wordlift has a connector where you can put in your key and just customize this query. So this is just a very simple GraphQL query that you can customize, and you can show specific data points. So here, because of this query, we're able to pull only the color, price, material, URLs, types, and categories of the products that we're going to look at. And here's what that looks like. If I wanted to check the performance, so this is the clicks for different categories, price, material, and all this other stuff. So I can now start to dig deeper if I wanted to. Why is suede performing really well? Suede leather. Why are products maybe that are around 330 euros performing really well? Is there anything unique about them? Sometimes you might find some products like material might perform really well because once you inject that material markup into the website or the color markup, if someone is looking for a blue shoe, you've automatically told Google, hey, here's a blue shoe, or here's a black shoe. So anyone who's not done that, or I think the most common phrase that I've heard is a little black dress. So if you're selling dresses and you've talked about, oh, this is a black dress, that automatically puts you in the top running for the search results that are gonna have black dresses in them. So you might want to know what queries are actually performing really well for this blue suede shoe or this blue dress, something like that, right? That's right. Where this data starts to really dig deep into the different product attributes that you have.
Right, and we're into blue suede shoes, and here you're talking a great deal about detail and the detail that Schema Markup can add, and giving you an advantage in a place where Google isn't 100% sure. Steve, what's your experience been with that in terms of the detail you provide with Schema Markup, boosting your rankings and getting you to the top where perhaps other people are less clear?
And yeah, I think making a visual is really important. One of the things we always try to do, at least on our monthly reporting more than anything else, is show a screenshot of before and after and what the search results look like. And then below that, the data and what that difference made. I think that's the easiest way to make it clear to stakeholders what the benefit is and what we're talking about, because sometimes stakeholders get a little bit lost in translation. Even with the name of the tools we're using, like Looker Studio and Data Studio and Power BI, they're like, I don't speak that. Explain this to me in English. So I think that's kind of where I would start. But yeah, I think just as we'd kind of gone through, having some before and after, and having a screenshot or two to show what those differences are, I think that's a good way to start.
Brilliant. No, I mean, I think reporting is actually one of the hardest things to do. And we spend a lot of time doing these experiments and geeking out over graphs like this. And as you say, I mean, looking here, Munene, is I see data, and as a business owner, I don't necessarily see money. How can we translate this into money?
Yep. I don't know if you have a slide on that one, but I can talk to it from just a very basic web analytics level. And because we're associating a URL that we're testing, or a set of URLs if we're rolling out across multiple pages, as long as you've got that annotation set up so that you know when that deployment date was and you know when that propagation date was, it's really easy to go back and say this URL generated X new dollars of revenue from Google. And I would start with Google only because we don't really know what Bing's doing all the time, and they make up for such a small market share that it's okay, in our opinion, to be a little bit myopic in thinking that Google's our primary objective. They do have the majority of market share, and they do tend to to give us a lot of really helpful data in their search console when you look at some of the different rich results that you can see there. So I would associate that URL and say, so we started our tests April 1st, where we rolled out video thumbnails across a subset of pages. Those video thumbnails resulted in 20% increase in click-through rate. Our rankings haven't changed yet, but we're getting more of the clicks because of that richer result. And because we're getting more of the clicks, here's what we've seen in terms of revenue increase from organic, from Google, when you're looking at your medium and your source in analytics. And I really prefer the trend charts. The trend charts, can really show that sort of spike. And the leadership teams, I like pie charts too. They're fun, but I think the leadership team really wants to see that hockey stick effect in the reports, and like, whoa, we made this huge change. Like when we rolled out, the videos, we did like 20% of the pages on public storage with videos and video markup, and it was like, whoa, we saw a pretty healthy lift right when the results changed to provide richer results. So really kind of neat to see it from a trend chart perspective, because then they can see the lift and the uptick, the green arrow, and stakeholders love green arrows.
Right. I mean, so this presentation by Munene shows you where you should be focusing or where things are going well, and then you're saying over time we can show you the uplift, which is where you get buy-in. So Munene, any last comments on this, or are you going to tell me that Looker is now dead and we should be looking at a different tool?
Power BI.
No. So the only thing I'd add to what Steve just mentioned is this is Google Search Console data. So the blend is the knowledge, your Wordlift knowledge graph and Google Search Console data. You can play around with different blends. Unfortunately, the Looker Studio connector, the Google Analytics connector on Looker Studio is not very good with blends. In my experience, it keeps breaking anytime you try and blend data, but you can export that data to a spreadsheet and blend it from the spreadsheet. So if you wanted to see the money, which is what you're really interested in as a business person, not all this traffic excitement, you have those reports on your Google Analytics, right? So instead of looking at traffic, all you would need to do is now change this to, okay, what revenue or how many transactions am I getting on this product material? What revenue am I getting on this category? Again, this is just a pie chart for just visual effect for this specific demonstration, but you can play around with different charts, both on Looker Studio or Power BI, and you can see how that changes year over year. You can have that line graph that shows you, okay, this is how you're performing last year, or this is how you're performing the previous period. And you can start to make those decisions. What do we need to start focusing on right now compared to the performance that we had last year? We've had clients that have come to us and they're like, we're really dropping traffic, but they have no way of knowing where exactly they're dropping traffic. So maybe they can see on Google Search Console, there's this single page here that has probably lost like 7,000 clicks in the last 1 year. But that single page that you're seeing there only tells like about an eighth of the story. If you start to look at it on a site-wide and you start to break it down into categories, for example, you can start to look at, okay, so we dropped traffic here, but the revenue remained constant. But here's another section that dropped traffic and seriously dropped revenue as well. And you can start to make informed decisions based off of that data. So I'd say Google data, the Google Analytics data comes in handy when you're trying to look at revenues. And also, just to add on the Google Search Console stuff, this only shows you data for organic traffic coming from Google. An interesting thing that I found was that we tend to overlook all this data coming from Bing and Yandex and all these other search engines. But in some cases, especially when you're dealing with multinational sites, it is actually relevant. But I think because, like Steve mentioned, we're so focused on Google, you might miss a transaction or two that has a couple of €1,000 that would actually have really changed the way your graph looks like. So Google Analytics comes in handy when you're looking at organic traffic, because you have a whole 360 view of is it Bing or Yandex or DuckDuckGo. There are people who are also using that stuff, and they're probably buying, but you'll never know unless you're actually looking at the data.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And really one question here from Racine is, could you please give the link to that library you mentioned in the first 5 minutes of the webinar? Steve, if you can remember, do share that and I can share it with Racine. And Munene, please carry on, because you're about to tell me that Looker is
not good enough.
Now redundant.
Well, in some ways, I think I wouldn't call it redundant. I'd say if you really want to get into large sets of data and play around with large volumes of data without constantly having to wait for your report to load, Power BI will be very exciting for you.
And Power BI is developed by who?
By Microsoft.
What a surprise.
The war continues. I thought it was ending, but Microsoft made a comeback, and now we're trying to toggle between Zoom and Google Meet and now Teams. Everyone's on the Teams thing. It's just it's interesting to see that comeback from Microsoft, because they were always so bloated when it came to code and proprietary stuff, and it felt like the rest of the world was going more open source. But welcome back, Microsoft. Hey, I do have 3 really quick case studies just to kind of show the benefits of how this has worked for some brands. IHOP, for example, we worked on this really fun project with IHOP where we said let's roll out event schema for every food event that happens, whether it's National Pancake Day or whatever it happens to be. And so I think it was about 1,600 location pages, all had the event markup pointing to the actual event page with the date and everything in it. And it was really exciting. We saw this 20% lift in click-through rate when we had that extra row of event markup, almost like it was, if you do a search for any kind of concert or event, you'll see a list that shows up underneath the listing with the date and links to the specific page. Same account, we tested FAQ page and on a number of other pages, and we saw 11% increase in CTR. And you have to imagine from a revenue math perspective, what traffic means, what the value of a visit is. So by increasing 11%, you're increasing 11% in most cases in revenue. It might have been somewhere like 10.5 or something, but close enough. Belkin, back in, I don't know, 2015, 16, we first started experimenting with all this fun structured data. We tested the video thumbnail, and we put our product right dead smack in the middle of the video when you had to do that to get a thumbnail you wanted. If you remember that, we put our product right dead smack in the middle of that video, and it looked like a product listing in the search results. And this one we averaged 4th position in many cases where we are on page 2 or striking distance. There's no pages anymore, but in today's world, it would be, position 11 through 20, right? And then we also saw on that one a 26% increase in CTR, which is incredible just by having, a video next to your listing, which is now on the right where it used to be on the left. One other fun one that's kind of neat is, and this is kind of a variable, is for attorneys. We did this test where we added the star ratings to each of their pages, respective to customers who left reviews for that particular type of case, not just blast the same review across every single page on the website, but make it very specific to the type of practice area. I was in a truck accident and they helped me with this case. That review, that rating goes on the truck accident page. That every single time we did pre-2021, we saw a minimum 12% lift in click-through rate. And now it's a little bit variable because I think they're trying to give a little bit more emphasis on their local service ads that have reviews. So a lot of times you'll see the review not displayed in your search result anymore. And that's kind of a controversial, topic, but still test it, still test your product review schema. It's a great way to do it. So there's a few examples of where we actually saw CTR data that translated into traffic data that translated into revenue, and those numbers were pretty consistent across the board. You can see a lot of that. One of my favorite sites I like to use as an example as a competitor of one of our former clients called CBDFX, and we'll use at cbdfx.com, and we used a tool called what was it? Something marketing SERP, I think is what it was called. And so this marketing SERP extension, you just click on schema and it shows you what schema they're using. Really kind of neat because we looked at like CBD gummies and we're like, oh my God, they're using Thing, cannabis, and they're pointing to Wikipedia. That's really interesting. We started to watch their rankings when they didn't even appear in the search results at the time. And then they made it to like page 2 over the course of a couple months with minimal new links going to those pages and minimal changes to the page beyond what was in the structured data, and all that great entity knowledge graph, defining the meaning of words efforts. So really kind of neat to watch. If you want to reverse engineer one, cbdfx.com, and look at some of their categories and how they're using Thing and About and mentions under Thing. Kind of a cool thing.
Brilliant. Ooh, I'll look at that after the show. So back to Power BI. What's so great?
What's so great about it? Definitely the wide range of connectors that you can use to pull data into that you can use to pull data into your reports. Another really great thing or really great feature that I love is they have this feature called the blank query. And you can use the mQuery language to fetch data from a wide range of data sources. So just in case you go into Power BI and find your connector is not available, you can easily just use the mQuery language. Today in the world of ChatGPT, you could always customize your code. You have your own personal coding assistant over there, and it can write for you a neat piece of code depending on what you want to pull into chat to your Power BI report. I also discovered that you can also build your own custom connectors. If you're excited about software development in that way, this will be an interesting thing for you. So maybe you find that the Google Analytics connector, for example, doesn't pull the data the way you want it to. So you can decide, what the hell, I'm just going to create my own connector that pulls data from Google Analytics. Takes a bit of time and a bit of technical know-how. But yeah, another neat way to play around with the data on Power BI. Super. So again, here, blends also come in handy. So you can blend and mash up a wide range of data. And the volumes also don't matter here. However large your data is, I think the more Power BI gets excited. So here I'm just blending, or I'm not blending any data here. I'm just showing a very simple tree map where I was interested to see, okay, how many URLs actually have the product, the color markup, sorry. And one thing that this can also help with are instances where maybe you've injected schema into different pages in your website, but you're wondering, okay, what pages have I not injected schema? So here you quickly, right off the bat, have a list of blank pages that you can tell there's no color markup. So if everything else is performing really well, you can come back to this and just inject that schema that you want. Again, you can blend this with just like we talked about in Looker Studio, with a wide range of different data sets. You can look at this based off of traffic, clicks, CTR, average position. If you want to look at the revenue, if you want to look at the transactions, if you want to look at how FAQ schema specifically is performing, you can play around with this data in so many different ways.
Oh, there's an interesting page with resources. So we can, if we leave the resources up there, then we can finalize or finish this discussion. We've got another 4 or 5 minutes left. If you leave that on, then people can, I hope you'll be sharing the slide deck. Not sure how we can share it. Perhaps we can put a link in the description on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And Steve, you were sharing case studies, and you managed to get most of the case studies you mentioned in our initial presentation in there. Did you get them all in there, or have you got more case studies you want to share in the last few minutes?
We covered it. I definitely want to, on my end, I definitely want to make sure that people know some ways and some things they should start testing. If you're measuring with Power BI or Looker Studio, these are some of the areas I would look for e-commerce. Obviously, product markup is a no-brainer there. Test having reviewed by, like having an expert review module on their category pages. It's kind of, Google's been talking about this experience, expertise, authority, trust signal. And I've noticed on pages where we've got an expert review, that example, the CBDFX, you'll see it on their page where they actually have someone, it looks like Seth Rogen. It's kind of creepy, but anyway, it's neat because it tells the user that, hey, someone who's an expert in this industry reviewed this page and it's all accurate information, and you can use that schema reviewed by. And there's a lot more of Google sharing how you can tell Google about yourself and some of the latest news and things that they've been putting out. So having real people and real names on pages can be something fun to test. Using schema.org/thing for ingredients or components of the product or different attributes of what that product is a great way to define, like we talked about earlier with the word shoes, right? What something means. FAQ page and breadcrumb list are fundamental. It's the very first thing I'll look for. Are we using breadcrumb lists to help search engines understand our site hierarchy and provide more rich results in terms of thumbnails in terms of breadcrumbs in the search results? And then video and image markup. That's what I'd test for e-com. For lead gen, I'd mention the FAQ page and breadcrumbs, fundamental for any type of page. Video and image markup might be something also you can test and see how it affects your CTR. But there's a lot more of that too. If you want to reach out on Twitter or Instagram, or even shoot an email, we're happy to kind of share other examples and things to test. I did put the link to the rich results gallery. So if you want to look at how your pages align with the different things that are available for you to test, that might be where I would start. Just as hey, let's look at how interesting our search results could look, and that might be at least a starting point for what you schedule as a test for maybe the month of May.
No, brilliant. And a huge question of measurement is click-through rate, another is rankings. And you would argue, if I understand correctly, Steve, that click-through rate is likely to be the one that changes the most fundamentally in the short term.
I think those are the two that I mentioned earlier. The click-through rate for sure, because if you get more clicks, it can mean more revenue. The other is the array of search terms that you appear for in Google Search Console for a given URL if you're using that entity markup.
So don't focus on position, which is the mistake I just made.
Yeah.
Munene, have you got any last comments in the last couple of minutes? What would you like to share that you haven't yet shared?
I think to emphasize, don't be afraid to test and review the test results. Actually make it a fundamental part of your SEO strategy. Don't just throw in everything and hoping something sticks, because at the end of the day, if something does stick and you had not prepared to test it, you wouldn't know what stuck and you wouldn't know how to replicate it. I think that's the beauty of testing and all these reports, is to get actionable insights that you can replicate, maybe in another website, in another category of your website, in a new product that you'll be launching. So test, report, test, measure, then find the insights, rinse, repeat.
Brilliant. And
we also,
don't be afraid to test a theory and accept that you were wrong in your theory with the data that shows you were wrong, and say, well, actually, no, that wasn't the best solution. Here is the best solution. Sorry, Steve, one last thing.
No, say, Jason, we also learned something new, that shoe is actually a family name. And I can imagine that that's the kind of family that'll keep you on your heels. And I always wonder, you know, if you marry a male in the shoe family, do they give you the boot? I don't know. Anyway, dad jokes all day for you here. But thanks again, everybody, for having me on these things. It's been a lot of fun. So.
It has been a great deal of fun with a couple of jokes and lots of geeky data stuff. And Looker Studio is now out the window and it's BI for everybody. I obviously completely misrepresented that. But what I did love was the fact that I thought that Google Data Studio was the bee's knees. And in fact, Microsoft, once again, as you said, Steve, have come back. And it isn't really coming back because they're still one of the biggest corporations in the world. So they're just fighting to keep their place, and their comeback might be simply that they replace Apple and Google. Let's see what happens.
We'll see.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. That was absolutely brilliant. We've got Rossin who's saying, sorry, he must go. He's got another webinar to go to. That's huge amounts of webinars for him. Thank you, Munene. Thank you, Steve. I'll sing you out. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Steve and Munene.
Serenaded twice in one day. This is a highlight.
Brilliant. That was all.